I'm John Dickerson, and this is Washington Unplugged. I'm joined today by Marc, our CBS News political consultant, to talk about the latest on healthcare reform and the White House and a Washington tradition called throwing somebody under the bus. That's where I want to start with you, Marc. We saw in the White House, in the Washington Post today, a piece headlined "Deeds Ignored Advice White House Says." This is about Creigh Deeds, who's running for the gubernatorial seat in Virginia. It seemed like a textbook case of somebody being thrown under the bus. What did you make of it?
Well, the tire marks are certainly very thick, and what's interesting about it is it comes at a crucial time, a couple of days before Obama is campaigning for Creigh Deeds, thereby completely undercutting whatever anticipatory press his visit might be getting. It's true, the White House is frustrated with Creigh Deeds. Creigh Deeds' camp is frustrated with the White House. But John, the reality of Virginia in 2009 is it's just not a good environment for a Democrat who's not terribly dynamic. Talented guy, really smart guy, Creigh Deeds is, but he's not a dynamic guy. And, you know, Democrats have controlled the state at the gubernatorial level for 6-8 years. We're in a state of recession. It's certainly a national phenomenon, but it's not surprising that voters are looking for something else.
And that was the message in this piece, was that Creigh Deeds is not a great candidate. This has nothing to do with President Obama and any negative coattails or anything like that.
And I think that's another reason why they're trying to, I mean, it's in some ways it was less about Creigh Deeds than about the White House trying to say there are specific reasons why Creigh Deeds is going to lose in Virginia. We don't want people to get the impression that Virginia, which voted for President Obama, is suddenly swinging back in the direction of being a red state. And that's true. It's probably a purple state. But being a purple state, that doesn't mean automatically that President Obama has an advantage there. It's a cautionary tale for the White House and for Republicans as well.
All right, we'll move from Virginia now to Afghanistan. And this week we had another round. Yes, it's quite a distance we'll travel, but we have a big passport on this show. Vice President Cheney said that the president's slow decision-making was emboldening the enemy, and that he seemed afraid to make his decision on Afghanistan. This initiated another round of a predictable drama. Where do you think things stand, both policy-wise and politically, on the president's Afghanistan decision?
The chaos in Afghanistan after the first election and the decision by President Karzai to accept a runoff election has given the president time. White House officials told me when this happened that the president now believed that he had the luxury of being able to wait until after this November 7 runoff is completed before he had to make a decision. And the thinking there, though, is in terms of Afghanistan. Bringing it back to the realm of domestic politics, what's very interesting about public opinion on Afghanistan is that it is certainly split, and it's split slightly, is tilted slightly to those who are very concerned about the ongoing U.S. presence in Afghanistan. But the issue still isn't terribly salient to people. It's not. It's an issue they care about, but it's not a pressing issue. And I think the president believes he has leeway because of it. Vice President Cheney, I think, who is not one to act out of politics. He's a guy who truly believes this stuff, and he's not hearing as much from Republicans as he did early on that President Obama has to rush and make a decision, because I think even some Republicans now realize that given the fact that the political situation might change over the next couple of weeks, it's worth taking a step back and slowing down a little bit.
And just as a matter of a historical reference, there was a long period where the White House was trying to figure out what kind of partner they had in Nouri al-Maliki. And there was a famous leaked memo of Stephen Hadley, who went over from the NSC, who went over to look at Maliki to make sure he was the kind of person the U.S. could partner with.
Well, and then before the Obama administration, the Bush administration spent about 8 months trying to figure out with then General McKiernan, who was the commander of forces in Afghanistan, how many troops to add, how they should partner with the Afghanistan government. So, these decisions are tough, and they tend to take time. And the White House calculated that they could balance the idea that the president wasn't immediately accepting the wisdom of his ground commanders with the idea that him being the president, he needs to take time. This is a really complicated decision. And whatever decision he makes, it'll have legitimacy because he took the time to make it carefully.
And a quick question. Did you see any distance between Secretary of Defense Gates and White House Chief of Staff Rahm Emanuel on the question of whether the chicken and egg question, which had to come first, stability in the government before strategy announcement, or the other way around?
Well, I think you did. Although I think it was a little bit overstated, but I think taking the chief of staff at his word, he was essentially saying that the political situation would have to be ironed out before troops would come, and that's going to take a long time. I think what he meant to say is we need to have a better sense of where it's going. Something that Gates would certainly agree on, but the way he said it made it seem as if the president was going to wait several months. And I think Gates, who was told the quote by a reporter and asked to responded a little bit incredulously.
Other thing the White House is trying to iron out these days is healthcare reform and what's going to happen to the public option. Is it coming back to life in the Senate in this so-called opt-out provision?
I think it's coming back, which I think says something about the direction of health reform overall, which is that Democratic leaders in both chambers are talking about it in a way that doesn't go to the fear-based aspects of it. They're talking about it in a way that suggests that something's going to get done. I mean, there are lots of different avenues. The House, in particular, they're trying to figure out the compensation rates for providers and doctors. And it seemed as if the first proposal, the robust public option, which would pay doctors Medicare plus 5%, but pay providers, the other providers, just plain Medicare rates, is a non-saleable provision. So now you may see another proposal by Pelosi and something else. And Harry Reid has decided, as you said, that he may get 60 votes with a public option that includes a state opt-out, perhaps though with a trigger foisted on top of that. An
opt-out so that the states could say, if we don't want this big thing,
right.
we'll.
And the idea though being that once states see how the pressure or the cost effectiveness of the public option, that even if they don't accept it initially, over time they'll go to it, which is one reason I think why public option advocates would be okay with a trigger, even though some states wouldn't opt in immediately.
Last quick question on healthcare, which is that in the coverage of this, supporters of the public option were a little nervous at the fact that in a conversation with Harry Reid, the president seemed non-committal. It didn't push one way or the other on the public option. I thought this was the time when he was going to get in there and lead and take a stand.
I did too. I'm surprised that he remains so disengaged. You talk to the White House and they say, well, he's engaging at different points. He's wading in and he's moving back when it seems like Congress is moving on their own. And inarguably, at this point, Congress is moving on their own. Harry Reid is coming up with a proposal. Speaker of the House is coming up with a proposal. They're counting votes. So when the president needs to intervene, when it seems as if there's a stalemate, I have a feeling he'll come in and now I've said this every time I've been on for the past 4 months, but I do believe it's going to be true eventually, which is one of the wonderful things about being a pundit, because something's always going to be true eventually. But at some point, when there's a stalemate, he's going to come in. But there really does seem to be momentum in favor of a public option compromise. Does the president need to intervene at this point? Probably not.
The last question.
Yeah.
Fox News. There is a real war and a fake war, and then a war between pundits over this question of the White House and what do you think is behind the White House's position on Fox News?
I think there are two things. One is, as the White House publicly acknowledges, they are worried that the press, that the mainstream press, the non-Fox News press, is beginning to look at Fox News for cues as to what stories to cover. They cite some comments by Jill Abramson, the executive editor, managing editor of the New York Times, who said that we realize we've missed some of these major stories that Fox has been covering, and we're going to pay more attention to them. Which, because this White House is so, in some ways, their worldview is very much connected to the worldview of the New York Times. It's just it's a fact about being, in some ways, a Democratic White House, but it's also the particular worldview of this White House that concerned them. I think what also concerns them is not so much the fact that Fox has become, in essence, a voice of the opposition party, but the type of issues that Fox is glomming onto. I think the White House finds to be a bit dangerous, and even more dangerous than being divisive. People at the White House will say, "Oh, it's not Doug Glenn Beck. We don't think he's a racist. We don't think he's fomenting this sort of angry dissent." That's not really true. There are people at the White House who are very concerned about Glenn Beck, not his specific, not the details of what he says, but the environment that he's fostering, and so they believe that a campaign of delegitimizing Fox News helps them with liberals, but it also will delegitimize Fox News in the eyes of all of us so that we don't cover what they're covering. That's the idea.
We'll see if it works out. Marc Ambinder, thanks very much.
Sure.